For those of you who don't know, I'm Brooks Barron. I'm the Minister for Environmental Justice for the United Church of Christ. Delighted to be doing this edition of Creation Justice webinar with Michael Malcolm and a host of wonderful panelists that we've got with us, and we'll introduce shortly. Michael, before I introduce our panelists, would you like to give us some framing for how we can think about our conversation today as we gear up for the climate strike?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for being here. I am excited to hear from our panelists as well. And so I'll make this short and brief. I was reading a book called Divine Rebel, and in this book it gives a story about Sean Cleveland, who was this young man in college, and there was a group of, I want to say 40 homeless people who were about to be put out of this cathedral. And while they were in college and overheard this, he and his friends decided to get up and they decided to drive and do something about it. And so they drove to actually go and see about these people. And when they got there, they were greeted by the sign that said something to the fact of, how can you worship a homeless man on Sunday and not stand with them on Monday? And it was speaking of Jesus as being homeless, because Jesus says birds have nests and foxes have holes, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. And they decided to stand with them and partner with them, with these homeless people. And when they came to get ready to put them out, they said, you won't put them out without putting us out as well. So they put themselves in harm's way and put themselves on the line in order to stand with those who were being harmed. And my brothers and my sisters, we have before us a panel who has decided to put themselves in harm's way and stand with those who are being harmed. The climate crisis that we face, because after all, we do know that those who suffer the most actually do the least impact when it comes down to the climate. And so these people who are us, these beloved ladies who are before us, are going to speak to us about how they are actually being involved in the climate strikes that are happening right now. I turn it back over to you, Brooks, and you can bring them.
Right. Thank you, Michael. You know, I always think for preachers that join these calls, one reason to join is you get part of your sermon read by listening to Michael. You just take those notes and deliver it on Sunday. But thank you, Michael. All right, we can now turn towards our speakers for today. We've got 5 terrific panelists. I'm going to introduce each of them, and then we'll let each of them go one by one. First up, we are going to have Sarah Shore, who is a campaign leader for 350.org. If you have been in the climate movement at some point, you have probably gotten an email from her. At some point, you've probably attended an event that she has helped organize as a national campaign leader. She works so hard and does so much that makes the rest of us look lazy, I think. And so we're delighted to have Sarah with us. She'll give us an overview of the climate strike in just a minute. Up next, we will then have Michelle Peden, who is from North Carolina Council of Churches, where she works as part of North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light, as well as their Partners in Health and Wholeness program. She is a product of UNC Chapel Hill. We won't hold that against her. And she has previously worked with Farm Workers, a nonprofit in Durham, North Carolina. So we're delighted to have Michelle with us. Up next, we'll then have Rabbi Katie Allen. She is the co-founder and president of the Jewish Climate Action Network. She has extensive background as a spiritual leader. She's a writer, a blogger, in addition to serving as a staff chaplain at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. She's bringing back memories of my days in Boston many years ago. And then Katie will be followed by Kristen Barker, who is the co-founder and director of One Earth Sangha. Kristen is a teacher and board member with Insight Meditation Community of Washington, D.C., and she is a Green Faith Fellow. Kristen is additionally a co-founder of White Awake, whose mission is to develop awareness of race dynamics among white people. Terrific. I love that. And then finally, we will have Abby Mohop, who is the co-director of the Green Seminary Initiative for Green Faith, in addition to doing lots of other things I've noticed for Green Faith. She is a Presbyterian minister and a PhD student at Drew University. She's a regular blogger and has had her writings appear in a variety of outlets, including Sojourners. And so what an all-star lineup we have with us today. Sarah, if you can get things started for us by giving us kind of an overview perspective that you bring to us as kind of a national campaign organizer.
Yes, thank you so much, Brooks. It's really great to be on this call with all of you. I think the faith community plays such an important role in calling for bold climate action, and so I'm honored to be here. And thank you for that intro. That was very sweet. So I just want to give a bit of an overview about how we got here around climate strikes and a little bit of the history and where we are today. So as many of you likely know, I think it was about 9 months ago, Greta Thunberg, a young teenager in Sweden, started to strike outside of her school on Fridays with the message of, we need bold climate action. Our leaders aren't listening to us, and why should I go to school and learn about science and the future and how to get educated if my future is not going to be available to me, and our leaders aren't doing what they need to be doing and following the science. And so Greta started striking outside of her school every Friday, and she inspired a movement of young people around the world calling for climate justice and using their voices and striking to call attention to the fact that climate change is happening now, and we actually need strong, bold solutions to the crisis, and our world leaders are not doing enough. And so this really sparked a movement of students across the world. And I think Greta was a huge impetus for this, but I also think that youth movements have been showing up all over the world and really leading the way. We've seen this in the US around gun violence over the last few years. We've seen this in protest movements across the world, that youth are really leading the way. And we've absolutely seen this on climate change. So this has inspired student strikers across the world who have been walking out of classrooms and striking on Fridays across the world. It's been, and they've been calling for action, bold action on climate change. And I would say, as someone that's been in the climate movement for a long time, that youth have really changed the conversation on climate change in this country much faster than we've ever seen. We see all of the Democratic presidential candidates are coming out against the fossil fuel industry. They're trying to out-climate each other. We're seeing the Green New Deal pick up steam in a huge new way. And we've seen a lot of movement across the country. We've seen a lot more people who are looking to get involved in climate action and looking to join this movement, and they're inspired by the youth. So huge props to all of the youth who have been organizing around this. And the other thing that really inspires me about the youth leadership is that they understand that climate is an intersectional issue that relates to migration and immigration. It relates to poverty. It relates to all of the issues of social justice that we're fighting for. And they've been able to really articulate that and are calling for the boldest demands that we know that we need instead of what is politically possible. And so they've inspired the rest of us, and we're in a place where we have a lot more people joining our movement. So about 3 months ago or 2 months ago, the youth got together and they decided that they wanted adults to join them in the streets. And they made a call for adults across the globe to join them on September 20th in the streets to strike for climate and demand bold climate action from all of our leaders. And so September 20th, they're asking folks to show their support, to walk out of work, to walk out of school, to stop business as usual, and show support for the youth and calling for the boldest climate action. And so that's what we're here to talk about. And we've seen massive interest from adult organizations and institutions in joining to support the strike. We're seeing all kinds of support from places that we've never seen before, including we have major multi-issue organizations like Move On and the Women's March and the Science March, Avaz, the Hip Hop Caucus, the League of Women Voters, networks of national community organizations like the Center for Popular Democracy. We have environmental organizations like the Sierra Club, the League of Conservation Voters, 350.org. We have unions. We have more unions joining in on this climate strike than I've ever seen in any day of climate action. SEIU, we have Jobs with Justice, the American Federation of Teachers, a bunch of their locals, the California Federation of Teachers, the Massachusetts Teachers Association, the New York State Nurses Alliance, a few UAW locals and CWA locals, UPTE locals, and then also labor councils across the country are joining. So we're seeing enormous excitement from all areas of our movements for social justice. And we've also seen a massive amount of faith support and faith leaders coming out for the strike. So we're really excited about that. And right now, we have 588 events across the US that are registered, which is the biggest day of climate action we've ever seen. We have more RSVPs than we've ever had for a day of climate action at this point. And there are thousands of events registered across the world. So I think this is going to be pretty big. I think it's really exciting. I think in a moment where we're seeing climate chaos all around us, we're seeing hurricanes hitting all over the place. We're seeing flooding. We're seeing the Amazon burning. We're seeing fires, and it's imperative that we step up in this moment and we follow the leadership of the youth who are calling for more than we could ever imagine. So really excited to be here with you all today. I'll just end by saying again that we are so happy to have so many faith organizations and congregations that are joining us on strikes. And we want all of you to be telling your stories about why you're joining climate strikes. And we want you to do that in a few different ways. We're hoping that you will be posting on social media as much as possible leading up to the strikes. I can post in the chat like what hashtags we want you to use, but we want to hear more faith stories over social media about why you're choosing to join. We also have a faith sign-on letter for clergy and people of faith to really show how the faith community is showing up in this moment. So I'll also paste that in the chat. And if you haven't already, we want your organization and your faith institution to sign on as an official partner. We want to show how much faith support is out there, put your name on the website, and just really show the enormous amount of support. We have over 400 organizations that have signed on to support. So I will also put the form in the chat if you want to officially have your organization, your synagogue, your church, your institution sign on to climate strikes. So thank you everyone for being here, and just really excited to mobilize together.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Very inspiring to hear all that's going on. Very inspiring. Thanks. We will now transition to Michelle. Michelle, I'll let you take it over.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle Peden, as Brooks said. I would like to start out this little section, my section, with two videos that I have from two youth leaders that I work with very closely. The first video we'll see, they're both very short, but the first video is Rishi Ranabathu, a 15-year-old in Cary, North Carolina, and he is the founder of North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light's youth initiative that we have. And the second video is of our summer intern, the youth summer intern that we had, who Daniel Perrin. He's from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and he is 14 years old. And I hope you both enjoy. Let's see here.
Hello, I'm Rishi Ranabathu, 14 years old, a sophomore, and the founder of the NCIPL Youth Leaders Initiative. The climate strike is an important opportunity to bring everyone together on the issue of climate change. My generation will have to deal with the effects of climate change, and we are also essential for change to happen. It is our moral duty to protect God's creation for all generations. By this virtue, the climate strike is extremely important to get everyone united across all faiths and generations. With NCIPL, I have worked with many people of all affiliations, and the message and values are the same. We need to take a stand against climate change. In my own religion, it is our dharma, or duty, to protect the earth with karma, or action, because we created this issue. It's our responsibility to take action. We also need to take charge and make a difference, otherwise change will not happen. The climate strike is a chance for us to make that difference and bring it to the forefront of the world, no matter what faith, ethnicity, or boundaries that we face.
Say yes to climate action!
Thank you very much.
And then I have one more video.
Hi, I'm Daniel Perrin. I'm a ninth grader in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and over the past few years, I've become more and more involved with the climate movement in a number of ways. My grandfather was an environmental policy writer for the state of New Jersey, and my family has been passionate about the environment as well. During my bar mitzvah process, I led a project to complete an energy audit of the synagogue, and also to replace the energy source for the eternal light, one of the most sacred and symbolic objects, to a solar panel. In the summer after that project was completed, I was a youth intern with NCIPL, the group we all know and love. And I think what urges me so much about the issue of climate change is its absoluteness. While it affects some disproportionately, it encompasses every aspect of our lives, every place, and every life. There's no running away from it. And that's a brief summary of my climate story and an explanation of why I will be participating in some way in the strike on September 20th. Thank you very much.
So yeah, those are two of our youth climate leaders in North Carolina. And I definitely wanted to start out this part of the webinar by highlighting those voices, because just because they are not able to be on the webinar, I really wanted them to be represented. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about how North Carolina and the Southeast in general is preparing and organizing for September 20th. Most of my experience, I will just disclaim up front, is with North Carolina and with youth in high schools primarily, but I know there's a lot of work being done in colleges and universities as well. So for our promotion part before the 20th, I can't believe it's 10 days away. It's really sneaking up on us, but something that we put together at NCIPL is a printable bulletin that we are emailing to our constituents that people can put in their bulletins on Sunday. Even though we only have one Sunday left, it's an insert that people can take and post and share, but it's a great way for faith communities, especially since they're pillars of our bigger communities, to know what's happening, to make sure that the parents know what's happening, faith leaders know what's happening, youth pastors know what's happening, and they can be sharing it with their children, their students, and congregants. We are also going to be asking faith leaders and parents. So I can't take all the credit for this idea. Mothers Out Front actually shared a really neat idea to record themselves speaking with their children, having these conversations about why climate change matters, why this is important, what the strike means to them. But I want to take it a step further, especially with our faith community, and ask for faith leaders and the equivalent of youth pastors or youth faith leaders in any type of faith community to sit down and record themselves, as long as it's okay with the student or the youth, have a conversation about why climate change is happening, what their thoughts around it, what do they know about it, what questions do they have, and post about it. So that can look like a blog, a video, a vlog. It could be, I mean, as simple as like a Facebook Live video post. And if they're not comfortable, then maybe just, you know, making a synopsis and posting about it on social media. And like Sarah was saying, it's important to use the hashtags. And that the hashtag that they're using at Mothers Out Front is Our Pledge, Their Future. And I think that that could also very much apply to faith leaders in all faith communities. We are also asking faith leaders, obviously, to be talking about this at the pulpit. I know it can be difficult sometimes. Should it be difficult? Anyway, but talking about it from the pulpit is important, as well as Wednesday Bible studies. So we have tomorrow's Wednesday and next Wednesday are two ideal evenings to be talking about this. And youth groups can be talking about this, youth pastors. I did want to say that just from my experience working with youth in North Carolina, it is sometimes difficult, and I think important to respect youth pastors as they bring a certain curriculum throughout the year. But if they're able to even just mention it at the beginning or the end of their Sunday time with the youth, that I think would be great. Let's see, some challenges that I have seen, especially with even just the two individuals that we saw the videos from. They're both obviously huge youth climate leaders in our community, but they're very concerned with grades and with school, and they're both obviously going to be doing huge things in the future. And it's been kind of interesting to talk to them about their willingness to take action on September 20th. We've had conversations, and you know, I kind of walked into it expecting that they would say, absolutely, I'm going to walk out of my classroom, we'll be making posters. But both of them were kind of saying, it's really going to depend on the week. We'll try to figure out if there are going to be any sort of projects or tests that are happening that week. So that's been a challenge that I wasn't totally expecting. And it's been a little bit since I've been in high school, and remembering unexcused absences, that's a real thing. So those are some of the challenges that I've been talking with them about. But some of the things that could work around that, or solutions to these, there's so many, but a couple things look like having actions before school starts. Clubs happen all the time. They meet 30 to 45 minutes before school starts. As students are walking in the doors, you can have posters, we can have handouts. There's plenty of, at North Carolina, we use block scheduling. So lunches are on a rotating basis. So if you just grab one or two students from each lunch, they could have posters, again, handouts, or they could just simply be sitting in a circle and discussing climate change and why they want to be striking that day. And even just that is going to start making people ask questions. Students are going to be walking by and asking, you know, what are you doing? What's happening? And then again, also after school, I mean, we have practices and clubs and groups that meet all the time. After school, before school, during lunch, those are all options that won't necessarily disrupt the school day if students are worried about that. But there's also things that parents can do. One solution that I was told from a retired teacher a couple weeks ago that I hadn't even thought about was parents can fill out a form in advance. So this does take a little bit of advanced planning to ask the school if it's okay if they take their child out of school for an alternative educational experience. And most of the time, the school administration doesn't say no. Granted, that means that they'll be outside of school during that action. But hopefully there are some events or any sort of actions that are taking place in the local town or a city nearby. But there are pros and cons, right, to pulling students outside of school and then keeping them in school. There's also one of the most creative solutions that I've heard is somehow using a doctor's note because climate change is a health issue increasingly. So I'm not exactly sure the technicalities of that and what kind of doctor would be able to do that, but I just thought that was really interesting and a very beautiful way of intercepting these issues. And let's see here. And then also parents and Teachers, maybe less so, just because I know it can be difficult to balance a fine line between being involved and doing something potentially political. But at least parents and faith leaders can reach out to school administration and say, this is happening on September 20th. Just want to give you a heads up. Letting them know that students have the right to peacefully protest, if that even just means walking outside of the classroom and gathering in a hallway and taking just a 20-minute time for people to be talking, to share their stories or whatever that looks like. So those are some things that parents and faith leaders can be doing outside of school, because I know, at least for our part, it's been kind of tricky because this is happening on a Friday. But obviously the constituents that we usually work with is faith communities. But even outside of the school, you can, we have youth gatherings that happen all the time throughout the school year on Saturdays, Friday evenings for fun. But this can be another type of get together outside of school with your youth group, if you'd like. So those are some solutions. Hopefully, those are not by any means all of them. It's just some ideas for things that people can start thinking about. And something that I've really noticed and am so impressed by is I'm 25. I consider myself pretty young. I think some people would even consider me youth still. But there is just such a passion in the generation that's in high school right now. And, you know, coming from the youth place, I want to sit down and talk about what's motivating us. Why does this matter to you? And they're so driven. They're incredibly action-oriented. We were talking about ways that this webinar could be useful, and we were talking about like what inspires us and what faith are youth bringing to this? Why are they even interested in doing this? And over and over and over again, as I was thinking about it, I just feel like the justice is the faith, is the reason, is the goal in every way, shape, or form. And so if we could just give the youth the tools, I have firsthand seen them build the house with those tools. And we don't even need to be telling them how to build the house. But if they build it, then they will be happy and ecstatic to live in it and be fruitful in it and make it happen. So those are the biggest things that I have seen working with youth, especially high school youth. And in the two high schoolers that you saw were 14 and 15 years old. I want to see if there's anything else that I wanted to mention as well. Sometimes, so I have a younger sibling who's a teenager. And so on a weekly basis, I'm interacting with teenagers, and it can also be really interesting. So I think on the flip side, and neither positive or negative, there are also some teenagers, especially in the age of technology. This generation has grown up with technology in every aspect of their life. And so I think as adults, we assume that we know how organizing looks like, and it looks very different. And it also takes a lot of courage to be asking youth to step out and stand out inside their high schools. As I was talking to Rishi and Daniel, you know, Daniel is going in as a 9th grader in his high school, and he said he didn't really know enough people or know enough avenues to make people listen to this, to organize for this. And I know that Rishi was saying he goes to a huge school, and I just think that there's a platform for every single student, and not every student is a Greta, and we love our Gretas, but as long as we can identify the platform that they have, there is power in that. And if that looks like just a short video on their Snapchat or a hashtag on Instagram, then that is, every little bit counts. And I've seen that working with teenagers especially. All I can do really is share my experience, share my story, share what makes me passionate about this, and they will take it.
All right. Thank you. No, that's all right. Thank you, Michelle. That was terrific. Lots of insight, ideas, and inspiration. Terrific. We'll now move to Rabbi Katie Allen.
Thank you. So you mentioned health effects, and I just want to start by saying I'm in Eastern Massachusetts, and there is an outbreak of Eastern equine encephalitis here. And actually the frequency of it has been, there's some indication that it's increasing slowly with climate change, and it's also moving farther northward. So there have been some cases in Vermont and New Hampshire, which is totally new. And there is an incredible amount of fear that is associated with this. There's a school near me, a town near me, where there was a young girl, a 5-year-old, who was infected, and their kids are not going outside at recess. So, and the fear that is just around these mosquitoes is just humongous. So there's so many ways that this is impacting us. And that's one that I'm just feeling very much personally right now in terms of what I'm seeing as the responses around us. I want to, that given, I just want to also start by saying a little bit about just what speaks to me in terms of Jewish tradition about why this is important and why connecting in particular at this point to this climate strike and this youth movement. And so, first of all, just for me, it's just kind of a given. There's, creation, it's sacred, and there's only one, and we need to take care of it, and we need to take care of all of it. And the picture of tzedek, of justice in Judaism is so prevalent. The idea of tikkun olam, of repairing the world, is part of so much of Jewish tradition. So these ideas of justice and creation coming together and caring for all that is just very much, in my mind, kind of the bottom line, the big picture, the whole background. But in terms of this particular climate strike, there are a couple of quotes from Jewish tradition. One is from the prophet Malachi. At the end of it, he says, "Lo, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before the coming of the awesome, fearful day of the Lord. He shall reconcile parents with children and children with their parents, so that when I come, I do not strike the whole land with utter destruction. Lo, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before the coming of the awesome, fearful day of the Lord." This is just so powerful to me, in this idea of, okay, these kids, these children, they're out there saying, this is our future, this is our world, and we need to reconcile with them so that we do not have this utter destruction of the whole land. And another one comes from a rabbinic text, the Mishnah, where Ben Zoma says, "Who is wise? One who learns from every person." And I'm thinking about that now with this youth movement in terms of all of us older people and what we can learn from young people. And already I've heard some of that put out there. Who is brave? One who subdues their negative inclination. Who is rich? One who appreciates what they have. So this appreciation of this world and of the people who are doing so much, and all the people who have spoken here, and so many people who are out there on the streets doing so much. Who is honored? The one who honors others. And just as Michelle was mentioning, that need to honor so much of what our youth are doing, and whatever they're doing, it's great. The strike comes at an interesting time for us in the Jewish community because we're in the month preceding Rosh Hashanah, the new year, which is the month of Elul, which is a time for reflection and sort of looking at ourselves and how can we make ourselves better people. And so to me, it feels really appropriate because one of the things about Rosh Hashanah is sort of this birthday of the world, celebration of creation that goes along with the other aspects of the observance of the holiday. So it fits in very perfectly in that way, and but it also makes it complicated because rabbis are like super, super, super busy right before the high holidays. So it's a time, and cantors and, generally the professionals in the Jewish congregations are super busy at this time. But it also offers opportunities, and we've been kind of, encouraging and supporting some rabbis who we've connected with who are going to speak about this from the pulpit on Rosh Hashanah, which is the 30th of the month, and that's when, the congregations are filled. But JCAN, the Jewish Climate Action Network, we are working hard with a team of people that are doing some great work in terms of reaching out, supporting, connecting, getting the Jewish community organized, trying to get people to show up, respond in different ways. We've connected with Jewish communities and there are JCANs in, I'm in Massachusetts, but there's one in New York City and DC, and there's a Jewish Earth Alliance around the country, people connected around the country doing things. So we're all connecting and sharing resources and working to get people out on this day, and also to do whatever can be done. We're working to try and connect with youth leaders. It's being a little bit difficult in some ways. We haven't done that before. So part of what I'm seeing this, to my mind, is an opportunity to start that work of connecting and organizing to a broader level of the Jewish community. So to some extent, I see this as almost like a tool for organizing. And it is true that we are also seeing more people coming, more people getting involved and interested, more people asking how they can be helped. So it's already happening. And one of the things, so Rabbi Arthur Waskow from the Shalom Center has also been putting out a lot of ideas. And one of the things that he suggested is the idea of blowing the shofar, which is a call, it's like a silent prayer. A wordless prayer, a loud but wordless prayer, as a tool. So we're just inviting people to bring their shofar if they have one to the event that will be happening in Boston, picking up on that idea. One of the things that we have JCAN has some connections around the countries as well, and one of the things that we're encouraging people to do is to, start your own Jewish Climate Action Network node in your area to get Jews together for any kind of action. Something we are encouraging, we're helping with in whatever way we can. So just getting more and more of the Jewish community on board is part of what we're trying to do. I think to some extent for us and the other organization here in the Boston area that's been getting involved, and this is new, is Hebrew College, and so we're excited about building that connection there. So I'm looking forward to. I'm really hoping that we'll get a good showing at the climate strike, but I kind of feel like in some level for us and our organizing and the work we're doing, what's equally as important is just the people that we're connecting to who are new, that we haven't connected before, the relationships that we're starting to build that are new relationships, because on some level it's really what we do after this that's gonna make a difference. So continuing in the long haul as we go on from this. And one of the things that Rabbi Waskow is starting is the holiday of Sukkot, when we build booths, sort of flimsy structures, and live outside and reconnect to the earth, that to use this as a time to have some kind of celebration action. And he's promoting starting that this year, and it's kind of short notice. So I'm hearing some pushback, like we don't have time, it's a busy time of year, blah, blah, blah. But I've also heard the idea that, well, we can start planning for next year. And so if this kind of becomes some kind of an annual event that may include some kind of action as well as some kind of celebration, or depending on an individual community, what might happen there. And so one of the things that just, to my mind, is so wonderful about this climate strike happening and the youth that are bringing this to us is it's just a whole new level of connection, a whole new level of involvement, a whole new level of organizing that's going to be possible for it. So that's part of the excitement from my mind about going forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie, for those remarks. And you are so right about this being an opportunity for cultivating new relationships and building bridges and so forth. So thank you. We'll now transition to Kristen Barker.
Oh, you can't. There we go. Hello, everybody. So I'll just speak a little bit about our approach to the march and to the strike, and how we're thinking about it from our perspective of our community. And that is to say, so I'm just going to do that by showing the Wonur Sangha website, which is a Buddhist mindfulness response to climate crisis, ecological breakdown, very much from the Western tradition. We don't claim to speak globally for Buddhists, so it's mostly Western Buddhists is our community, but within that, multiple traditions. So this is our website, and the way that we chose to feature talk about the strikes is just again and again to, as you saw in this conversation here, to feature the voices of youth. So with that as a lead-in, we wanted to then, and folks have mentioned this before, like Greta is amazing and getting a lot of press, but we wanted to pick up some of the other voices, like G. Batista, this youth leader who came from Mexico, her family being impacted by climate change there, and then coming to New York City and finding, oh, there's Hurricane Sandy, and there's no escaping this, and that's what activated her. And so she has this beautiful interview, which I encourage you to listen to on the podcast interview with Why on Earth. But it's very much consistent. The way that she's speaking is actually, and we find this a lot, that a lot of the indigenous traditions and the Buddha Dharma, there's a lot of synergy and overlap between those kinds of worldviews and sensibilities. So we especially wanted to feature her voice in that. So again, you might want to check out that, and maybe somebody can pop that into the chat window. Okay, so then what we're doing is basically just encouraging folks to gather in our community as Buddhist and mindfulness communities to make sure these are these moments where it's like, it's kind of ironic if you know anything about the Buddhist tradition, just like lift up and say, I'm a Buddhist, because you don't really draw a lot to your own identity. But this is a moment where it's important for us to do that along the lines of what Sarah was talking about, just like how many different contingents are part of this, and to say that the faith communities are showing up, that within that it's not just the faith communities that we might think of at the top of our heads, but including things like in groups like Buddhist communities. So, oh look, there's this webinar being featured right here on our website. And then, so we're just starting to get folks popping up with their gatherings. So then I'll just say a little bit about, so as you can see, I guess there's one more thing, is that we're really encouraging people to check out this resource of how to stand with young climate strikers. That is, how to make sure that we're in this back support role for what is, because there has been inaction, so insufficient inaction on climate crisis. We have our global frontline community, and it's called the youth. Community Organizing 101, you put the impacted community in the front, you give them the mic, you let them tell their stories and give the narrative and demand the change that is needed. And my goodness, that's exactly what we're seeing. So it's just really important that in all of our messaging, we continue to reinforce the messages, not necessarily from even our Buddhist community, but from lift up the voices of the youth, which some of course, have mindfulness practices and are very much involved in Buddhism. So with that said, I could say a little bit about, did I share my screen or share my browser? I can't remember. Let's see, I'm gonna make sure that, well, you know what I'll just stop the share. So I just wanted to say a few things about the way that we hold this crisis, generally speaking, because frankly, there are not a lot of Buddhists in the West, and so it's not as clear. So I thought I'd offer just a little bit of framing with the understanding that, again, this is about the youth. So the premise from the Buddhist perspective is that to respond skillfully to any situation, to not create further harm, we have to be thoroughly grounded, regulated, non-reactive. Okay, that's really hard with climate crisis because it's in some ways traumatizing. So, and you can see there's a lot of, you might be aware that there's a lot of synergy between the Buddha Dharma and modern psychology. In some ways, the Buddha's teaching presages modern psychology by 2,500 years. And so that idea of going into hyperarousal, fight, flight, or hypoarousal, freeze, what the mindfulness practices, what the Buddhist practices do at their very onset is help us get into that zone of tolerance, the place where our frontal cortex is online. So that's really helpful. And what our organization is doing, and what a lot of the folks in our larger community who are talking about eco-dharma, that is the intersection of this crisis with the Buddha Dharma, is to talk about how did we get here? How do we understand how human beings could possibly have gotten to our situation where we are with such great enthusiasm, seeming to destroy our one and only home and all the beings with it, to understand that deeply. And then what are the practices that help us be with this in the present moment, skillfully, compassionately, starting with our own hearts, but not stopping there. Then from that place of emotional regulation and hopefully some level of deep, deep integration, grounded in a commitment to non-harming, responding with courage, skillfulness, and a radical compassion that leaves no one out, absolutely no one out. So the image that we often use is 1,000 hands of Kuan Yin, who is the Bodhisattva of compassion, reaching out and responding to the cries of the world. And in some ways, the global youth is such a very real manifestation of the cries of the world. So I'll just end by saying that we do these online trainings called like the Eco-Sattva training, that in the end get us hopefully to this place where we have that kind of grounding that's robust to any setback, that's thorough, deep, and can handle whatever comes under the heading of the Bodhisattva vow. Sentient beings are innumerable. I vow to save them all. It's a promise that is ridiculous in some ways. It cannot possibly be achieved, but it's a way of orienting one's life not to the satisfaction and the gratification of one's own desires, but rather service and compassion to the suffering of the world. So the Global Climate Strikes is a perfect moment for our communities to stand up and fully embody, by sitting in the back, exactly that kind of vow. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this community and to all those who are doing everything in their community to support the youth and to support this moment. What an opportunity the youth are giving us to embody our values. Such a gift. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. That was very rich and thoughtful and engaging. All right, we will now move to our final presenter speaker for the day. Abby, go ahead and take things away.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? You won't really be able to tell me, but
Yep.
the other panelists will be great. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, as Brooks mentioned at the very beginning of this call, I'm calling in from Cape Town, South Africa, where the Financing the Future Summit is happening. It's the first international conversation about divestment from fossil fuels that's multi-sector and it's international. So I spent the last few days already talking with people from around the world about how we must collectively join together as people of faith, as laborers, as people in foundations and the public sector in cities and universities to respond to climate change with our money. So it's been interesting to be here in South Africa and also do some organizing for the climate strikes. As you all know by now, you've listened to all these other amazing speakers, so you know that this is a global call for people of faith and for adults of all stripes to stand in solidarity with youth. So I just want to underline a couple of things that have been said already, and then offer a couple more resources for you. I have had the privilege and joy of co-convening the faith working group with Reverend Malcolm, and it's been so fun. I can see him dancing. It's been so good to be with him, and it's been great to work with people of faith from a variety of different traditions. I come to this work as one of the organizers and trainers for Green Faith. My actual title is too long. But I also then have the gift of working with Kristen Barker on the Green Faith team. So let me tell you what we're thinking about. So Green Faith believes that we make cultural changes by preparing and mobilizing and organizing people of faith to create cultural shifts, and that we people of faith have moral authority that uniquely prepares us to walk with people and to move people and to call out systems that are unjust and unfair. And we do that through individual lifestyle changes, through institutional changes, and through systemic change. And so we see the strikes as being individual acts that change our hearts and also create a cultural shift. So we've already heard of some of the things about what faith communities can do in the next week to mobilize. And I really want to underline the resources that each of my co-panelists have lifted up, particularly what Kristen shared is, for my money, the most concise collection of how to get your faith community to RSVP for an event happening near you, to organize an event if there isn't already an event scheduled near you, to invite people who are in your faith community to come with you to a strike, and to tell everyone you know why you're striking on September 20th. Those are the things that you can do now. And I'm so excited that there's a bulletin insert that Michelle is sharing. I can't wait to put that up on our on the Strike With Us faith page. So I can't wait for that resource. And what's also available on the website is a bunch of other faiths. I'm just typing and talking at the same time, so that's not gonna work. But Strike With Us /faith is our faith-specific page, where there are other resources for a variety of traditions, but of course Christian. And the bulletin insert, I hope, will be on that page as well if I get it from Michelle. But if any of you have sermon notes or scriptures or prayers that you want us to include, send me an email, and I'm putting that in the chat box. Okay, so the last thing that I want to make sure that you know about is just underlining what Sarah has already mentioned, and she's put into the chat box, and I put into the chat box, is the sign-on letter of people of faith in support of the climate strikes. We're right now in the process of getting some high-level people of faith to sign on to that letter, who will publicly say that they're supporting the letter. And as soon as that is public, it will be public. But I can tell you that Tracy Blackman from the United Church of Christ is one of those public leaders, and we're so delighted that she's joined so publicly in that. And we're in the process of getting many others. So that's what I wanted to share with all of you. It's been a great joy to be in this, and I really think this is the time, more than ever, that we as people of faith, as adults who are allies for children and youth who have said enough is enough, that now is the time for us to say we will not do business as usual, and we will go into the streets and do a new thing together. And it will be just the beginning.
Awesome, Abby. Thank you for all that you just shared. Terrific. Well, I knew we would do this. We're pressing near the end of our time here. And so if somebody, I think we will have to move to a closing call to action here with Michael. And then those of you who want to stick around can stick around, but also realize we've scheduled ourselves for an hour and our time has come. So, Michael, do you have a closing call to action for us?
Actually, Brooks, I think everybody gave us a closing call to action as they spoke. And so I'm just simply going to remind you, we have the faith letter up, sign it, have your other people to sign it. Make sure you circle that around through your congregations. That's an easy way to get involved in the climate strikes. Another thing, if you're going to preach a sermon, if you're going to give a talk, if you're speaking to youth about the climate strikes or how they're feeling about the climate, put it on social media, let everybody see it. In other words, let's make this as public as possible. Show the community at large that the faith community is 100% in this fight, and not just in this fight, but we are more than willing to take a leading position in this fight, and we will not quit until things change. We will do as Amos has told us, to let justice roll down as waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. We will continue to fight until God sees fit, or the Creator sees fit to tell us to stop. Until the very last breath of us, we will get out and we will march, we will encourage, we will mandate, we will dictate, we will do whatever it takes for us to ensure that our kids and the kids of our kids and their kids even have a future. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Get involved by any means, however you can. That is our closing call to action.
Great. Well, I'm ready to go. Let's go. All right. No, that was terrific, Michael. Thank you for that closing call to action. And gratitude to all of our panelists. Every one of you were terrific and had something really thought-provoking and insightful to contribute to our conversation today. So I'm just amazed at how all of this worked out so wonderfully with each of you. In the chat box, we've had some great comments and questions. I just want everybody to know that later this week, we'll send out a YouTube of this webinar. Plus, I will collect the web pages that were shared in the chat box and any resources that the panelists want to share with me to share with all of you. I'll put all that into an email and send it out to everybody who registered for this webinar. So thank you to everybody. It's been a terrific time with each of you. And special thanks again to all of our panelists. Take care.